So the innovation that I want to talk to today is not one of technology and tools, but one of mindset. Appropriately, a lot of what we teach in journalism school is about the craft of gathering information and telling stories, but too often missing is a discussion of who it's for. Who wants what we're creating? Who is it helping? Who will seek it out? Who will pay for it? And who gets to decide what good journalism is? If we want a future full of relevant, well-funded journalism, we have to be teaching students to ask those questions. We can't work in a vacuum, publish, and then pat ourselves on the back about the great journalism we did. We need a plan to aggressively reflect a community's priorities and voices, identify the audience for what we do, invest in bringing audience and content together, and track what works so we can continually experiment and improve. So I teach a class that's called Participatory Journalism, and my class makes up my staff at the Columbia Missourian newspaper. So our job on the community outreach team at the paper is to aggressively answer those questions on behalf of this one news product and on behalf of our audience, which is a general interest audience in a Midwest college town. So our job is to infuse these audience-focused philosophies into what the rest of the newsroom does. So I thought I would use my time today to talk you through one story that published a couple of weeks ago. It's not a fancy story. It's not a particularly sexy story. It's a story about a really bizarre high school mascot. It's the 100th anniversary of the Hickman Kewpie. That's right. And some very smart colleagues of mine with deep roots in the community knew that this would be a hot story. So we have a package of stories planned about the 100th anniversary of this really bizarre mascot. As our team of reporters is planning their coverage, here's what it looked like to expand the life cycle of this community story from beginning to end. As the stories are being worked on, we let the community know. This marks the 100th anniversary of the Kewpie. How do you feel about the Kewpie? Is it a point of pride? Weigh in the comments and tag people you know will want to weigh in. We'll start, and we tag the Facebook page for the school football team. 204 shares and dozens and dozens of comments later, we start to get a sense of what's important. We found some sources. In paying attention to what people said to us, we were also paying attention to what people said to each other as they shared this post. Arguably, our most interesting story in the package came from watching when somebody shared the story. They gave us a tip about something, not knowing they were giving it to us. They said something to their friends that led to a really interesting story that was not already on our radar. Invite other people to participate. Then take highlights from what they say, and in the lead up to the unveiling of the package, run something in our From Readers section of the newspaper that is points of pride from people who participated. We rolled those out as we went to drive some interest, went back to the Facebook page and tagged people who had already been featured in our story so that to build up the buzz and reward them publicly for their participation. In print every day leading up to the unveiling, we ran one of our reader comments. And throughout this, we're talking very concretely about who the audience is for this story. So I like to talk about audience as a funnel. At the very top of the funnel, all the people of Mid-Missouri and all of the students, faculty, staff, and alumni of this high school might be interested. But as you force yourself to get more narrow toward the bottom of the funnel, you can lead to really interesting conversations about yes, but who. So people who are interested in the history of our community in general. Definitely alums. Where do alumni of Hickman High School talk to each other? How can we tap into that? How can we reach current students? Where do people who are interested in this gather? How do people who are interested in this already share information with each other? So we do some of that online. This is me posting in a nostalgia Facebook group. Most communities have these. You know you're from Columbia Mo when. Thousands and thousands of people use this group to talk to each other about things in Columbia's history. So I shared that there and then tracked the traffic to our package from this specific post. We also did the same with other social media platforms, but this is a story made for Facebook. It's not the demographic of people who are most excited about this are a made for Facebook demographic. And then we did something that my team does from time to time, but this was an especially successful one. We made a flyer and took it to the home football game, the senior night, the last game of the season. So on the front page of this flyer was a glorified tease to several of the pieces in the package, a blurb at the bottom about the Missourian. We've served the community since 1908, just telling people who we are, and a URL in the middle that we could track to see how many people who actually got this flyer came. What's the return on this investment? If we're going to make this flyer, print 500 copies, go to the football game and hand it out. For what? There's the element, certainly, of just brand awareness and letting people know the information that's here, but ultimately we wanted to bring them back to our website. We also did something we have not been able to do before, which is sell an ad for the back of that flyer. We thought, who else wants to reach these people? Who could we partner with? Who shares this goal? And it turns out the High School Booster Club was all about it, and they needed to get information into people's hands about an event happening in the spring, so they paid us money to put the ad on the back. That also solved another collaboration problem for us, which was high schools aren't always excited about people coming in and handing things out at the game. But once the Booster Club was involved, no problem. We can stand where they're giving out tickets and put one in everybody's hand as they arrive. My student who was there on behalf of the Missourian, also we've been experimenting with Snapchat this semester. As we ask a lot of hard questions before launching a new social platform, an account on a new social channel, and one of them is who's there, what kind of content makes sense for them there, and certainly if we were going to use Snapchat to cover the news, a story with a particularly young audience would be a goal. So my student who was there handing out flyers also was using Snapchat to cover the game. And then we assess what worked. So what worked is in quotes because there's never one answer to that. It depends so fundamentally on what the strategies are for a given project. In this case, what worked was we reached 15,000 people with that original Facebook post. That's significant buzz. We made $150 selling an ad to the Booster Club. That's revenue. We tracked the URL. More than half the people who got the handout at the game used that URL. We just tracked the URL as the landing page. We shared the URL elsewhere, but we could track how many people came specifically there, not from a social referral or from our homepage. Healthy web analytics across the package, and we always pay attention to where on the internet that's coming from. This one was not surprisingly heavily driven by social. Participation and buyout from the community throughout the process, and a truly social life cycle for the community story. I look a lot at what my team does in the newsroom. A lot of times what I'm seeing as success is when we're able to do better journalism because of it. And when I see these philosophies popping up in my colleagues and people who are not on my community outreach team, I love that we made money from this. I love that we got a really, really great story idea by watching how somebody shared it and what they said to their network. And they told us something that my team of reporters didn't know about that. We do a lot of things that don't work at all. This happens to be a particularly successful project. But I wanted to use it as an example of what it can look like to not just publish a story and then have a team of people who distribute it, but to start from the beginning with really hard questions about audience. And then pay attention to what you do. If it works, repeat it. If it doesn't, learn from it. But my dream would be to have a curriculum that has these audience-focused philosophies embedded throughout. I've said from the time we started the community outreach team that my goal was to work myself out of a job. And I would love for these, for more classes to have a focus on audience and for us to be teaching students to make journalism that the audience wants and to go find the audience for the journalism that we think is important. Thank you very much.